And thank you, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Dietitian.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our June 11th version or edition of Ask the Dietitian. My name is Lori Bambaco. I'm inside the demo kitchen at Cancer Wellness Center on this nice summer day, and I'm so glad you could join me. I work here to provide nutrition services and programs. So I run programs just like this one that you're attending today, as well as some other topics of interest. Look on our calendar on our website for what's coming, because we have a lot of great things in store, including a mind-body kitchen series that is all about supporting immune function. So that's coming in the fall. Stay tuned. But I'm also available to meet with one-on-one. So if you are interested to receive nutrition, a consult, and then further counseling with me, you just have to ask. Eligibility is determined on our website. But certainly you could reach out to me. So those of you that are registered today, if you want to stay on, we're going to have time to talk after my 30 minutes is up. So what I'm going to do is today, our topic of interest is all about nutrition in survivorship. And up until today's session, I had sort of covered some of the topics of concern for our survivors who have finished their treatment and have some health concerns. So that includes cardiovascular disease, as well as blood sugar control and diabetes, and also bone health. So those were previous Ask the Dietitian sessions. We've recorded all of them, and they're available for you to view on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, I'm going to present today kind of the culmination of those topics, along with a couple questions that were asked. So I'm going to share my screen. And I have a PowerPoint to share that, again, everyone that registered will have access to this PowerPoint. Okay, let me just do a couple things. So good to see everyone. Thank you for joining. Okay, so this is our June 11th class, Ask the Dietitian. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to review those questions that were submitted ahead of time. Give a brief overview of what is recommended by the experts for nutrition concerns after treatment. Highlight some simple steps and solutions in order to put those recommendations into your daily lifestyle. And then I want to give you some great resources all along the way. I think that's very practical for most anyone that I work with. All right, so here are the questions. The first was, what type or types of low, no sugar and carbohydrate foods should one eat post-surgery, that's after surgery, right, to keep from losing weight as the body works to recover? And the second that was submitted, this is pretty general, good question. What are the foods that I should eat in order to improve my health? And I think that means in the survivorship or post-treatment free phase specifically, meaning you finished your definitive treatment, chemo, radiation, surgery, or a combination of them all. What's important to consider nutritionally speaking moving forward? So let's go to that first question. It was about surgery, right? And what foods to eat specifically in order to keep from losing weight and help the body recover. Well, I thought it was interesting that, low and no sugar and carbohydrate choices were included as part of that question, because I actually would argue that they are essential. They're vital in the post-surgical recovery in a nutrition sense. So I'm going to go over that just very quickly. Now, as it relates to nutrition goals, it depends. All depends on the individual. So every single person that I meet, I would do an individualized assessment. And we're going to consider a lot of different variables, including their medical history, their diagnosis, their medications, their dietary supplements they're taking, what they're eating, are they moving? And also, too, what type of surgery did they have? So it's really difficult for me. It's a great question, but it's difficult for me to answer because I would want to know what someone's surgery was in order to give more specific guidance, okay? Now, as I mentioned, it's unique to the individual. And in order to make nutrition goals, as a dietitian, I would do that comprehensive evaluation. And I would argue that's why you need to work with a dietitian, because most other clinicians are just going to give you a generalized or generic plan, and you deserve something that's a little bit more personal. So in order to maintain weight, what we understand about this balance is you need to eat enough calories to satisfy your weight. So sometimes if an individual is interested, I will calculate that out for him or her. But within those calories that are consumed day to day, we want to make sure there's a balance there, a balance of the essential nutrients. And so that includes our macronutrients, carbohydrates, protein, and fat, as well as our micronutrients. So let's talk a little bit first about those macronutrients. Let's start first with carbohydrates. So quality carbohydrates include these choices: minimally processed whole grains, starchy vegetables like a potato, fruit, and then low-fat dairy. They are necessary in our diet because they provide us with our preferred fuel source. So it's so efficient for our body to use carbohydrates that the majority of what we eat should be from carbohydrates. Now, as you see, there's sort of a hierarchy. So there are better carbohydrates than others in terms of their nutrition package. And I listed some choices for whole grains on this slide on purpose because I'm going to come back to this point in just a few minutes. But great choices within the whole grain family you see there. Things like bulgur or barley or quinoa, oats, spelt, even things crazy, different ancient grains like fricky or sorghum. The sky's the limit with choices, and they are readily accessible and really are a blank slate for you to start designing some healthy meals. Next macronutrient to cover are the fats, and the healthy fats include nuts and seeds as well as butter versions of them, olive oil, avocado, and fatty fish. Those are just some examples of foods that contain a good amount of those healthy fats. And they're required in our diet because they help us to grow new cells. Very important for someone who's on treatment or recovering from treatment or surgery. They also allow us to make the hormones that we need, absorb vitamins, kind of essential, right? And provide us with energy. So they're very similar to carbohydrates in a way that they are really relied upon for energy at times. They're really a nice bomb, I would say, of high calorie choices when we eat fatty foods. And in the winter, they're essential, right? They keep us warm. So that's sort of important. Last up on the macronutrient topic is proteins. And the quality proteins include the fatty fish. Again, that's a nice package of both healthy fats as well as quality protein, but also beans and peas, low-fat dairy, and poultry. And why do we need protein? Well, it helps our body to build and to repair tissue, to fight infection, and also to provide us with energy. So for most individuals that I work with during treatment and recovering from treatment, their protein requirements may be a little bit higher than normal or than usual. And again, that's part of what I can provide to someone within that comprehensive assessment and plan. So with regard to our macronutrients, carbohydrates, fat, and protein, what the experts advise is that we have an acceptable distribution of them within the foods that we eat or the total amount of calories per day. So there's a range. And again, this is where a dietitian can give some tailored advice about what end of that range might make the most sense for that individual. So what we would do is we would take that individual and decide how many calories does that person need in a day, given his or her circumstances. And then we would divide those calories up according to these ranges. So what you see is almost the majority of calories should come from carbohydrates. Okay, so we could go as low as 45%, but we can go all the way up to 65% of total calories coming from carbohydrate containing foods. And that really depends on a lot of factors. Next up is protein. So we could go as low as 10% of calories from protein, up to 35% of calories from protein. And this, a lot of things factor into this equation as well. But as I mentioned, for most individuals that are on treatment or recovering from treatment, they might skew a little bit higher for this range for protein. And last up is fat. So we don't want to overconsume fat. So you see the limit, it really is at 35% of total calories that come from fat. But we could go lower, we can go down to 20% if necessary. So besides macronutrients, we also require micronutrients for healing. And that prefix micro is there for a reason. We literally need microscopic amounts, like tiny, tiny amounts. And I mention that because many individuals falsely assume that if something's good for something, then a lot must be really good for that. Not quite the case. Definitely not with nutrition. All we need is the right amount. Okay, too little is detrimental and too much may also be detrimental. So let's go over those micronutrients. Put them here on a chart for you. So vitamin C is a vitamin that is responsible for the growth and the repair of muscle. And I've listed there some of the top food sources that you could try to include in part of your diet. Now, most of Americans are eating adequate amounts of vitamin C. We tend to do quite well in terms of meeting our goal. Iron is a mineral and it's responsible to transport oxygen and is also required for respiration and energy metabolism. Iron is found in the foods that you see listed there, fish, eggs, but also some plant sources. So I encourage you to think about how to incorporate some more plant proteins as part of a cancer protective diet overall. Next up is calcium and vitamin D. We learned about this in the last Ask the Dietitian session. They are essential for bone health as well as for skeletal muscle, okay? We find calcium and sometimes find vitamin D in our foods, but we find calcium mostly in dairy and the alternatives. Vitamin D is not really found in a lot of food sources. So sometimes if you're including salmon, you'll come close to meeting your goal for vitamin D, but very often we need to assess vitamin D intake and status and whether or not a supplement is advised. And then last up are electrolytes. I always think about this in terms of this time of year, hydration, but certainly for healing and recovery from treatment. So potassium and magnesium float to the surface. They are responsible for maintaining fluid balance, generating energy, as well as regulating blood pressure and our muscle contraction. Most Americans are not eating recommended amounts of potassium or magnesium. So we want to do a self-eval of our diet and see, are we including a lot of fruits and vegetables as well as nuts and seeds, because they contain good amounts of potassium and magnesium. So things listed on the slide are potatoes, tomatoes, nuts and seeds, as well as spinach. Okay, so I'm going to move on from recovering from surgery to really what the topic is at hand, all about healthy living and healthy nutrition in survivorship, so after treatment. And I thought it was interesting. I never noticed it until I prepared this presentation that the word heal is in healthy. I think that's so neat. So I don't know. Has anyone else noticed that? Chat, drop it in the chat if you had, or maybe we could talk about it after. All right. So as a cancer survivor, it's important to point out, and that's why I've included some of these topics up until this point, you may have a higher risk of these chronic diseases. So things like osteoporosis, heart disease, and diabetes. Okay, I covered some of that in previous sessions, but also survivors are at increased risk for a secondary type of cancer, obesity, and also too, quality of life and being able to perform daily activities. So therefore, the goals of nutrition in survivorship are to help reduce the risk for some of those long-term conditions, to maintain a healthy weight, to support a healthy metabolism, to give someone more energy. I just love that. And then also to improve mood. We know that nutrition is involved with each of these. And how do we accomplish that? Well, it's best summarized in the graphic that I almost always include in my presentation. It's from the American Institute for Cancer Research, and this was released in 2018, so still extremely relevant for us. What you'll notice is that after someone's been diagnosed with cancer, they are advised to follow as many of these recommendations as possible, because if they can do this, then they're accomplishing a lifestyle that is protective against recurrence and a secondary malignancy. And as it turns out, what they're starting to find in the research is that this type of lifestyle may reduce risk for death and dying from any cause, not just dying from a cancer, but any cause at all. So this seems to be the way to go, okay? If we're worried about our health after we finished our treatment, This is it. This is it in a summary, okay? Now, what I want to point out today specifically is my favorite recommendation, which is to eat a diet rich in whole grains, vegetables, fruit, and beans. And I affectionately refer to that as a whole food plant-based diet, which is very trendy, very popular right now, I'm sure, as you're all aware. Let's go into like what that really looks like. So most meals, most of the time, contain mostly plant foods. So that includes whole grains, vegetables, fruit, beans and lentils, nuts and seeds. So for meals, breakfast might start with something like a bowl of oats with some berries and nuts or seeds on top. Avocado toast remains extremely popular. I say take it up a notch and layer it with some vegetables and maybe even some beans for additional flavor. Lunch can be things like a bean burger or a veggie wrap in a whole wheat wrap with maybe like a yogurt dipping sauce or a tahini sauce on the side. And then dinner could be like a quinoa and bean taco bowl, and then some salmon kebabs. I mean, it's the time of year to grill, right? So each of these choices are technically plant-based based on what the experts advise. And that's sort of this is the way I would characterize the plant-based diet, is that most of the foods, most of the time contain plants, okay? This is another way to visualize what a plant-based diet looks like. And this is from the AICR, the American Institute for Cancer Research, and they have developed what they call the new American plate. It's a much needed transition, I think, that we need to consider. So what you'll observe is that on this plate, 2/3 or more of the plate contains plant foods. Okay, so vegetable, fruit, whole grains, beans and lentils, 2/3 of the plate or more. You're off and running if you've already started to design your meal that way. And then 1/3 or even less of the plate could be dedicated to our protein source. And it could be from animal protein. It doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be from a plant source like those beans and lentils. So I wanted to share a recent report card that came out about the quality of diet in our survivors. What are they eating? How close are they to meeting their goal? And this is really coming from a study that was published last year in 2020, looking at data from 2012 to 2016 around. But what they did in this study is they took 1,971 survivors. They averaged the age of 62.4 years. And just to share, they had a BMI of 29, so that most of them were overweight. They rated the quality of the diet for how close it was to the recommended guidelines. So they would interview them and they would ask them what they're eating. And then they also asked them to record what they were eating at times. There's some flaws to that, but nonetheless, let's see, out of a possible score of 100, what do you think? Oh, I wish you were here so you can answer. What do you think the score was? Maybe drop some in the chat. Out of a possible 100, how would you rate the quality of cancer survivors' diet? They gave them a 55.6. So that's failing, right? So the researchers assigned that grade of a 55.6 as low quality. And so there's some work to do here, right? The reason why they got such a low score was related to 4 factors. And so we kind of want to take this with a grain of salt because this could explain poor quality, but there might be a lot more behind the scenes that we don't know about. And we need more research to see why. Why is it such a poor quality diet that our survivors are eating? So here's the 4 variables that cause that score to be so low. They were not eating recommended amounts of whole grains. They were not eating recommended amounts of green leafy vegetables or beans, and they were overeating fatty acids and sodium. No surprise there. So the citation to that study is listed there on the bottom. What the researchers summarized is that a healthy diet is critical to improving overall health and recovery following a cancer diagnosis. I couldn't agree more. Okay, so let's talk about each of those 4 components. Actually, I'm only going to talk about 3 of them. Whole grains, green leafy veggies, beans, and then salt or sodium. So we'll start first with our whole grains. So I want to show you what a whole grain looks like. This is how we define it. It has three parts: the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. Well, what happens when we start to refine a grain is we lose things, really important things. So we lose this bran, which contains the fiber, as well as a ton of antioxidants and B vitamins. And we also lose the germ. So the germ is like the embryo of the grain, or like the yolk to the egg. It's packed with nutrition. There's tons of B vitamins, a little bit of protein in there, but also minerals and some healthy fats. The endosperm is what's left in a refined grain. And really, it's kind of the void. It's lost that fiber, it's lost those antioxidants and all those precious vitamins and minerals. So the processing, we lose the bran, the germ, and we're left with the endosperm. That's a refined grain, kind of sad. We could do better. So here's an important tool that I like to introduce as well about deciding which carbohydrate or whole grain is a good choice. So it's a 10-to-1 rule. For every 10 grams of total carbohydrate in a serving, we want to aim to have at least a gram of fiber. So on this label, this happens to be whole wheat pasta. There is 39 grams of carbohydrate, so we would want at least 3.9 grams of fiber. But I see on this label 6 grams of fiber. So this is a great choice. This is a whole grain, good choice in terms of improving the quality of carbohydrates in your diet. So other ways to increase whole grains, I love these choices listed here: oats, high fiber, cereal or toast, use that 10-to-1 rule, brown rice, quinoa, whole wheat pasta, and whole grain crackers. Important to use that 10-to-1 rule for those that have a package. And a great resource that you'll see on the slide is a link to the Whole Grains Council. And they're like a lot of fun. They say that whole grains rock. I agree a little bit, but it's a great resource for you all. But how can we add more whole grains to the diet? Well, I would say it all starts with breakfast. And could you swap in some oats or a whole wheat toast as part of your breakfast? Could you try a new to you grain, a whole grain, experiment with things like farro and millet or amaranth. There's so many new products on the market and they are really easy peasy, very quick cooking. And like I shared, a blank slate. So you use whatever flavor profile you like and you're off and running. Snack on air popped popcorn. I love to recommend this for a snack because 3 cups of popcorn is like 3.5 grams of fiber and less than 100 calories. So it's like a win-win when you pop your own. And then maybe try a whole wheat pasta as I demonstrated with that label. Okay, the next component of that poor quality diet. So we want our survivors to eat more veggies. So green veggies are great. Broccoli, kale, spinach, bok choy, collards, romaine lettuce. They are packed with nutrition from folate, which is a B vitamin that helps protect and repair our DNA. But they also give us some antioxidants, some phytochemicals, vitamin C, again, to help promote healing and to help support our immune system. And there's a good amount of fiber in our green vegetables. So this link here will bring you to a nice resource all about some green veggies and how to prepare them. It actually comes from a Canadian website that I happen to think is very helpful. So how to add more dark green veggies to the diet. If you make eggs in the morning or you have an omelet, throw some baby spinach in there. Baby kale, ramp it up. Have fun with your greens in the morning. Build a salad. And maybe instead of something like iceberg, you could really upgrade to romaine. Snack on some broccoli with some hummus. It's super easy to do, right? Or make a stir fry. I think that's an easy way to infuse more veggies into your meal. That is delicious preparation. Next, I want to talk about beans. So all beans are good beans, but I'm just listing some of my favorites that stand out to me. They are a package. They contain protein, they contain fiber, tons of vitamins and minerals. They each have different amounts, but they're all fantastic for us. So one of my favorite websites is the Pulses website. And that link on the slide will bring you right to their website. Tons of information, resources, how-to, recipes. It's really great. How would I suggest someone add more whole beans and lentils to their diet? Again, with breakfast. So if you think of a breakfast burrito or a breakfast taco, could you add, maybe you have eggs already, could you swap them out with beans or lentils? A bean burger. right? And they're so easy to make. I have a recipe if you would like one. Snacking on edamame, right? So there's frozen edamame that is already pre-cooked, and we could just thaw it out and eat it cold, or we can heat it up. And then as you see on the screen there, lentil tacos, I think would be a great idea on like a Taco Tuesday night. Okay, and lastly, we're going to talk about what to decrease in this poor quality diet. We want to decrease salt. So I'm going to put on the slide the top sources of salt and sodium in our diet. So 70% of the salt that we eat comes from processed foods. So right off the bat, if you're looking to pursue a whole food plant-based diet, you're going to minimize a lot of those processed foods. You're going to minimize the salt. So we're like checking off a lot of needs when we do that. These 10 foods that I'm going to list account for more than 40% of the sodium we eat in a day. All right, so we're looking to cut these out. I don't know if any of them come as a surprise to you. Maybe some snack foods. I'm sure you're aware that soup is pretty high, deli meats, some packaged poultry products may be in a brine, and that could be salty as well. So we just want to read labels carefully. And this link on the slide will bring you to an interactive food label that will help you understand a little bit more about reading products to see how much salt or sodium that they contain. Just for your information, we eat probably like 3,400 milligrams a day, and the experts want us to eat less than 2,300 milligrams in a day. So we have a lot of work to do here. So how would one reduce salt in the diet? I would say try to cook more at home and cook fresh or frozen products that don't have added salt. Cook more for yourself. A lot of restaurant meals also are high in salt. Compare products, as I suggested, compare your labels, and we want to look for a label that says that serving has less than 5% of the daily value for sodium. If something has 20% of the daily value, that means it's high, right? Because it's 20% in that measly little serving of sodium that you need in the whole day. So just look for a lower number, as low as possible. And I would say spice it up. Right? That's why that image is on the slide. The sky's the limit. Find whatever combination you want. Using spices and cooking a little bit more for yourself at home will help you reduce salt, but you also increase the nutrition because you're using spices and even herbs for that matter. And lastly, I just want to talk quickly about pursuing and maintaining a healthy weight. Experts advise that after treatment, survivors do the best they can to maintain a healthy weight and body composition. So they define that by BMI or body mass index. But what we do understand is that BMI is flawed. It doesn't really depict metabolically what is happening in someone's body. So we can compare two people with the same BMI, but have very different health conditions. So we also are starting to look at body fat distribution. So where on the body are we holding most of our fat? And as it turns out, we don't want the fat to be around our waist. Okay, so we can also determine if someone's at a healthy metabolic weight by looking at waist circumference. So sometimes in clinic and even here at Cancer Wellness Center, I used to use a tape measure because we could measure waist circumference and see if someone is pursuing a healthy lifestyle, can we reduce their waist circumference? That may not reflect itself on the scale always, but it will pay off in terms of improving health outcomes. So all about maintaining a healthy weight. We know it's lifestyle. That's what matters. That's what helps individuals achieve and sustain a healthy weight. So that incorporates a cancer protective diet, the one I just quickly reviewed, as well as regular physical activity. And it's not always easy to do. Okay. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here at the center to help meet with individuals one-on-one, or you can consider enrolling in our program that we call Weight Loss for Wellness. And we're actively recruiting individuals to start in late July. And what this does is it allows you the support in a group of an oncology dietitian, as well as a licensed counselor who is all about the mind and the body connection and how we combined can holistically bring about some positive changes in pursuit of healthy living. And so if that sounds like something that's up your alley, again, just check out our website. We're recruiting right now. Okay, so here are some resources to consider in survivorship after treatment. So NCCN guidelines, this is a patient version. The ACS, or the American Cancer Society, as well as ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology, they have care plans. So you could like specify based on your circumstances what your care plan should be. It's great. But ask your physician, ask your treating physician. Your oncologist should have given you a summary in terms of a survivorship care plan. And there are some institutions that have a survivorship center or a clinician to meet with one-on-one. And then again, from the American Institute for Cancer Research, they have a great section all about nutrition and diet in survivorship. Okay, so that's the end of my show, or slide, sorry. I'm going to stop my share, and I think we have a minute or two for questions.